Hi everyone, my name is Collins. I will be your panelist for this round. To all the teams and all.
Hello, my name is Vishesh. No preferred gender pronouns. All the best for both the teams. I'll be the panel for this particular round.
Cool. With that, the motion being debated is the first motion. Cool. Just a few housekeeping rules before we start speaking. Please do not violate any sort of protected attributes or maintain decorum. Please mention your preferred gender pronouns and preferred methods of taking POIs before you start speaking. Do not badger your teammates. Uh, cool. With that, calling on the Prime Minister to open the case from the government side. Here.
Cool. So before I start my speech, this is Yash going as PM. POIs, I'll be asking for POIs. You don't need to unmute yourselves. And if I don't take them around the 5th minute, you can put them in the chat as well. Having said that, I'll give you a countdown before I begin, just 10 seconds to get my points in order, and then I'll start. All right, cool. So starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, understand that democracy with all its flaws is still the best form of government, right? Which means the principle of voting in the best form of government is probably the most important essential of that form of government, right? Every individual feels like they're connected and have a sense of security in a nation because they feel like they can vote and probably affect policy changes due to this vote. So preserving the sanctity and the idea of this principle of voting is extremely important, and I think that's one of the most important metrics on this on which this debate should be judged, right? Where the principle of voting, where the idea of voting is still intact, and the principal basis on which this works is still intact, right? It understand that the right to vote even gives the lowest out of people the feeling that they are somehow connected to this nation, right? They still feel like they can affect policy decisions, that they can affect changes in society, and therefore this becomes such an important right? Now, to understand why NOTA was introduced in Indian politics in the first place, right? Understand, panel, politics in India is an extremely hegemonized space, right? Which means to say that even if there are multiple regional parties and like 100+ parties to so to speak in India, the problem is that the main two parties, that's the BJP and the Congress, are still the hegemony of Indian politics, right? Which means these are the parties that control the narrative, control Indian politics as a whole, right? Which means for anyone to, which means one, the choice is already limited, and for anyone to actually enter politics, you need like a sense of like privilege, you need a lot amount of wealth, you need a piece of nepotism, and all these factors to be able to enter this space anyway. And even if you didn't have these things and you try to enter the space, general populace views the space as space of politics as this dirty space that people shouldn't be entering in the first place. All of this leading to limited choice in the world of democracy, right? Having said this, so when you have limited choices, what tends to happen is you are forced as an individual to pick among the lesser evil, right? Pick among two evils and choose and go for a lesser evil, right? Which is why NOTA became so important, because it gave these people a right to send a message, right? So when I go ahead and take the effort and vote for NOTA, what it is showing is that I'm sending a message that I reject both of you. I reject this hegemony. I reject this sort of idea of that idea of these political parties controlling the narrative, and I want to change this, right? I reject both of you, and therefore I do not want to. I do not want to engage with you on any account, right? Uh, yeah. So what then does this recommendation do, right? The Supreme Court's recommendation is so important because it is, in essence, a reflection of the populace's idea on what they want to do, right? When I go ahead and click on NOTA and I don't vote for anyone, I'm sending out the message that I do not want to I do not want to engage with either of you, and therefore these party candidates need to be changed, and I need better people to go ahead and engage with, right? To both on pragmatics and principles, right? On a pragmatic idea, on a principled idea, because you are an individual that is paying taxes, and because you are a part of this nation, and you are a citizen, it becomes extremely important for you to have the right to not choose somebody, right? Now, just because I have to choose between two, and you're essentially giving me an illusion of choice, right? When I am a tax-paying citizen and I am an individual that is an important part of this nation, I should have a principled right to be able to choose, to be able to not want to choose anyone, right? What then do we claim are the impacts on our side, right? We tell you that we tell you on our end that each political party has an incentive to improve, right? They now have to cater to each and every individual and actually try and make an effort to improve, because they cannot just sit on their back and ride off of a wave of a particular political party or a political leader and hope to win elections, right? This also increases the sort of individual responsibility on each of these candidates, right? What that does is, now I, as a candidate in a particular constituency, cannot just ride on the Modi wave, right? I need to actually do something, go ahead and do something tangible for people to vote for me, because otherwise they have no incentive to vote for me. When people can just say, sure, I may support Modi, but I don't like your policies, I can kick you out, let BJP field a better candidate, right? This increases party incentives to both promote better candidates, good candidates, and throw out these bad apples, right? What it also does is, it doesn't allow you to ride the wave of a more popular candidate, right? The second probably the most important impact, right? Voter turnout will actually increase. Understand, panel, when you are given the choice of voting for a very limited option, what are the two end goal options that you have, right? One, you have you have the choice of voting between two evils, or second, you just do not go ahead and vote, right? What is the importance in actually voting? Understand, panel, going back to what I earlier said, right? The principle of voting is extremely important in a democracy, because it's a reflection of the populace's choice, right? Which means, if only 50 to 60% of the population is actively voting because they see this, they see the current democratic conundrum as being that they cannot choose between the candidates that they want, and so they would just rather not vote, is a terrible thing, because this is not a real reflection of what of what their actual choice is. Before I move on quickly, up UI.
Your literal statement just now about how 50% of the people aren't voting reflects terribly on parties shows why NOTA is not a necessary option. You have to defend re-elections too on your side. Please engage.
Yeah, sure, right. The idea of a re-election is very important, right? I think that's what I've been defending so far, right? A re-election is so important simply because the moment I reject this candidate, the same candidate cannot be fielded again. Which means, what I'm in a sense saying is, I don't like this particular candidate. Therefore, the party has all incentives to now go ahead and field better candidates, to change the candidates, right? This just does not exist on your side, because now I have not, I have no option left but to vote for these candidates, and therefore I think we take this. And even if op wants to come and claim that, oh look, a re-election is actually a wastage and a waste of money and time, I think this can be easily taken down by saying that democracy as a whole, the principle of upholding the democracy is probably far more important than the little wastage or little time spent or the little money spent on re-elections, right? So that's not a claim that they can make in the first place. Okay, having said, why is this voter turnout increase so important? Understand, panel, who are the kind of people that don't vote, right? These are younger people, these are minorities, these are fence sitters, probably the most vulnerable classes of society, right? These are individuals that do not want to vote because, one, they think that they don't like the candidate, or second, that the candidate they don't like let's say in the present, the BJP for minorities, the minorities just assume that the BJP is going to win the election regardless, because that's how the Modi wave looks like. I shall just not go ahead and vote. What's the point in me standing in line and going ahead and voting, right? There's absolutely no point, because I think the BJP is already going to win. This gives power in their hands, right? This NOTA actually having a value gives power in these individuals' hands. They are able to vote and actually make a change, and they can actually considerably get a large amount of people to back them. And this way, I think we clearly take this way.
I thank the last speaker for the very fine speech, calling on Elo. Here.
Yep, just 20 seconds. All right. I hope I'm clearly visible and audible.
Yes, you.
Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Government tries to paint their solution as the only way to uphold the principles of democracy. Let me prove to you that this principle is symmetric. There are exclusive harms on their side, and why there are benefits to the abolishment of NOTA and the for them, even with all these sort of actually change from them to actually change leaders of the party, right? So it's incredibly hard to get rid of them because they've probably accumulated some sort of following in the first place, right? Thirdly, there's always the political party. Cases of the Indian National Congress isn't the cases of nepotism and so on and so forth. Whatever how hard it is and how much criticism there is regarding the Gandhi family being the ruling family of the INC, they still haven't been able to be removed. What do we then tell you, right? In terms of characterization, what does the Indian democratic process then look like? It looks like involving a large amounts of money. That is, this large amounts of money being used as funding towards like collectivizing a particular party identity, right? These party identities, we tell you, are largely based off of identity politics, which Gov themselves also concede, right? That is socialist narratives, but also a lot of narratives that involve like appeasing the majority, such as narratives like Rahul Gandhi a lot of money towards minority groups in general, or the INC winning Karnataka elections based on like three reasons. One, you probably have to constantly but secondly, imagine from the perspective of the ECI and the government of India in general, right? Elections and voting is an extremely costly process in general. That is, the government of India has to allocate towards actually right? There are a large number of people, such as minorities, who suffer while voting because of like base their lives off wages, right? These people suffer the most. They simply can actually like participate voting and that's the case. These kind of statistics are still published in newspapers and media agencies. Get some sort of national level call out. Like a large number of people in Tamil Nadu aren't voting, and that is a large number of people in Tamil Nadu aren't particularly satisfied with the electoral process there, right? Secondly, you convince and force parties to tap into these large number of people that aren't voting in the first place. These are the most vulnerable people, the people who are the most dissatisfied with the democratic process in the first place. You're forcing parties to directly engage with them by means of campaigning, so on and so forth, right? What then happens on their side, right? We tell you that no real change can happen because of the turnaround time between these re-elections, right? We tell you these re-elections probably have to happen between 2 to 3 months of each other at their best case, right? That means four things, right? One, the party probably can't make any meaningful change with regards to their ideologies and narratives and their manifestos in the first place. This is largely because they have a limited amount of budget that they will have to like extinguish after each election. There's only so much amount of money that they actually fund, right? But secondly, they have years of carrying the same ideology anyway. That is inherently, if they're like a terrible party, they will have a tendency to retain it due to the way these policies are probably hard set into the policies, into the party's manifestos and ideologies, and its way of voting in the first place. But secondly, what we tell you is that like most likely what's going to be happening is to appease and to get voters in the like when at the time of re-election, these parties are going to make incredibly like surface level changes, right? That is, their core ideology will never change, but that branding of the ideology is like change. That is, Hindutva will still remain, but the way you paint it will probably be like just more appealing to like minority voters in general, right? We tell you that the change in like, there won't be any effective change in the quality of the implementation of these policies or how like regressive these policies are in implementation, because this largely doesn't matter for the parties, and the voters and the like the larger populace of the nation aren't going to feel any effective change. Thirdly, at best case, parties are going to be putting forward extremely short-term goals, even if they manage to create any sort of extensive change. Why? They view elections to be extremely turbulent themselves, and they want to appease their voters in the short term. They don't have the time and resources to make a real impact. And notice how large majority of the problems that voters actually face in India are extremely complex and like geo-locked in a particular way. That is, they're extremely specific to particular regions, right? But notice they, because of how turbulent the elections now seem to parties, they probably want to continue development that has probably already been undergone by the elected party prior, right? That is, notice what happened to Tamil Nadu highways. That is, at the changing of every single government, like the delay to actually develop these highways took extensively longer because of the reluctance of the new party to actually do continue what the previous party has done, right? Our second argument then on stagnation, right? We tell you that continuous re-elections probably shifts the view of parties away from actual governments. On the comparative, on our side, if BJP wins the elections, Congress will probably call out BJP's governments to be bad, right? On their side, what ends up happening is parties will largely just point at like campaigning strategies rather than actual government strategies, right? The impact of this is development is significantly likely to be impacted on their side world. Parties on gov world will choose to let their campaigns do the talking rather than actual development in progress. Continuous re-elections will also probably lead to like the halt of development on a particular day and like at times around the elections themselves. That's how campaigning and marches around the time of elections largely like put the nation to a halt, and the day of elections themselves, people like themselves don't go to work and such, right? We also tell you that voter fatigue is extremely likely. The reason is people don't have the time to keep up with these constantly changing ideologies, if any. And secondly, people don't have money to actually invest into the people voting on NOTA on their side of the house. So they're just gonna like parties are largely just gonna try to fragment majorities in the first place without actually making any effective change. For all of these reasons, proud to oppose.
I thank the last speaker for the very fine speech, calling on DPM. Here.
Am I audible?
Loud and clear.
Okay, great. I will be starting in 5 seconds. Starting. Oh, sorry, 1 second. Yeah. Starting in 3, 2, 1. Panel 3 clarification in the beginning itself. opposition's whole case revolves around the paradigm where re-election is happening at every point of time. We do not think that just because you'd like have this system in itself, it means 51% of the people are going to go ahead and vote nota, and every fucking 2 months you will have a like re-election, right? This is a burden that they need to prove, that why parties won't be setting up good candidates, given that parties will also lose a lot amount of money in terms of like going ahead campaigning, in terms of like going ahead and like during elections, doing rallies, etc. It means everyone in the political system will have an incentive, active incentive, to make sure re-election do not happen. Then why do we think this sort of recommendation exists? Understand, it's not about going ahead and give like making re-elections continuous. It's more about giving the sense of like right of voting to the people itself. We do not think this debate is about like going ahead and telling you, oh, we are going to make the most about of developmental change, because all the problems that like op tells you, like for example poor people not seeing a value in like going ahead and voting because like they have other immediate needs, is a problem that exists in their side also. They do not have a response solution to that. We think the way you can only change is when you give the right back to in the hands of the people, where people feel that they're appreciated, their will is something that's being represented in democracy itself. It means this debate is about the right in itself, and op has to defend that. Op cannot just be like, oh, but re-elections are costly, and never justify abolishment in the first place itself. We think that they had the burden to do so. But before that, what are the things that tell you? They tell you that candidates are not going to change because candidates are seen good, they have some sort of following, they have internal politics. Exactly, these are the problem that exist in Indian political system, right? Understand, look at the politics of INC, right? There's a lot of nepotism. Look at BJP, they're all like people who are like still holding on to power, and they don't want to lose out to that power. The reason that most of the young people are not even part of politics is because it's already so much hegemonized, and parties currently do not have the incentive to go ahead and do it, because they know that they can do face value politics and can always win. It means you need an external push to make parties realize that when they have to win an election, they have to win on the basis of the candidate itself. It means when people have an option to go ahead and choose not to vote to anyone, it means parties have an incentive. Parties know that they have to go through the process of re-election, they might have to put another candidate, etc. It means they do have to connect to people, they do have to make those changes within their party, because they do not want to lose on like not getting a majority. Because what's happening on their world, it's very easy for BJP to secure a win on their side of the house, because when I go to cast my vote, I only have two options, BJP or like Congress. Even if I do not like BJP itself, I will just feel like, oh, I might have to vote for them only, because there's no other option, and I do not like Congress doesn't have a great leadership. That's what you take away my choice in itself. We think that voting in itself is a right, and individuals do have a right to not choose as well. It doesn't just come to that voting is a choice to choose in itself. I will justify it basically on a principle level. When you as a taxpayer are a part of citizen of a country, you pay taxes, you like fulfill the duties of a citizen, you should be actively given a right to decide who rules your country, who makes the policies, who does that amount of changing. Taking the right away to not be able to like go ahead and like choose in itself is something that's, we think, they're principally fundamentally like affecting the principle of democracy itself. As long as this is this is going to be the problem, we think that this is extremely hard, right? So first of all, on the idea of their funding and continuous re-elections, three reasons why re-elections is, even if it happens, I will defend the case where it happens to, but three reasons why in most cases it won't happen, right? Understand, the moment you introduce this recommendation, the way parties work is going to change. Now parties know that if they do not get a sufficient amount of majority, they're not going to win, right? It means the burden on them to make internal changes, to push forward like better candidates. I know parties are not going to change their core ideologies, that even op can't prove, right? Core ideologies probably will remain the same, but now you're okay with like young people who are probably from those constituency to stand with your political party, because they're actually connected, they actually know the grand real, because you know that now you do not have to just fight Congress for winning like vote, but there is people also have an option to literally cast you away in itself. It means this fear in itself goes ahead and makes sure that parties do these internal change, right? But secondly, because they are actively doing it, we think that this is something that's not going to come to the point of re-election every point. But secondly, I think it also gives voter a better sense, right? Most of the people right now do not vote simply because they feel like, oh, my vote is wasted, because BJP is anyways going to win. Like, why to go ahead and cast a vote? Secondly, they also see that this is something, there is no good political parties in India. There's nothing to like go ahead and cast my vote. Now, when you tell this young woke population, most of the people who are right now voting is probably older people, because they just see it as something that they should. But now young people have much more incentive because they see their vote having some power. They see that okay, if like the parties are not doing good, I do have the right to go ahead and like ask for a re-election. It means you make much more voters go out and turn out. But most importantly, you give minorities this sense of belonging back. Because what minorities feel that they have to choose always between BJP and Congress on their side of the house. They do not like BJP. Congress is not doing a great job. Now, when they know that they can still make a change, they can still make BJP change the kind of propaganda through which the campaigning is happening, etc. It means they will be much more incentivized because they see a value in their vote. They see that they can make sure that BJP never gets the seat in itself when they go ahead and like cast a NOTA vote. Before I move on, yes, please.
If it happens so rarely, who are these voters who are voting NOTA, and why does it even effectuate change if it's so rare?
Yes. See, it's very simple, right? It's these people who are going to go ahead and choose NOTA can be the people who are minority groups who are not satisfied with the current political setup. It can be young people who see that BJP is like literally doing like Hinduism politics from like probably past 5-6 years. Like there's nothing that they are changing because the people are literally buying into it, just going ahead and casting because Mandir yahi banega, correct? So these are the people who think that their vote right now doesn't matter because it's not affecting the change. That's why just having NOTA is not enough, and this recommendation comes into play. Because when you as an individual feel that there is a chance of change, you are incentivized to go ahead and do it. So even if it rarely happens, it gives people back the life. But secondly, what kind of narrative gives in the society? Look, when people are only choosing between BJP and Congress, you do not give this narrative that they require a change in the society, because the polls show that 50% people prefers this, 60% people prefer this. But when you see that a large population prefers this NOTA, or a majority of people are actually going towards NOTA, you reflect what these people need. It means parties do have to ask for the changes which is currently important for young people. It means things like employment, it means things like poverty, etc., which won't happen at all on your side of the house, because you make them much more alienated from the system. You tell them either choose BJP or Congress, or it's okay, just don't vote in itself, because no matter what you do, only these two parties will always rule. It means hegemonies in political parties will always continue to rule. Always BJP will be winning on Modi, Gandhi family will be handling INC. At that point, we are very, very proud to propose. Okay.
I thank the last speaker for the very fine speech, calling on DLO. Here.
Hi, am I audible?
Loud and clear.
Yeah, just give me like 30 seconds. I'll just gather my notes. Hi, am I audible? Am I audible and visible? Sorry, I'm a bit of a mess right now. So, starting my speech in 3, 2, 1, go. I want to caveat something at the start itself, right? Their major idea or push here is that you probably want to incentivize parties to change their politics because they need 51% of the votes to win elections, and that's why they're probably going to change because they see the amount of people voting for NOTA, and hence they're going to change, right? Notice that this is symmetric on both sides, because notice that parties need 51% of votes either way on both sides to win. Meaning, if they don't get 51% of votes, they need to change their policies, they need to change their things. They think about strategies that essentially needs to lead for victory, and they're probably going to think about that. But two, notice that Nota itself has some only benefit on their side that they try to do if it only comes at majority. So notice the fact that if Nota even gets 10% of the votes, but BJP wins 51%, notice that the people voting Nota will still feel that their vote is negligent and not that important either way. That still stays significant on their side, that people will still not think that Nota is that important. Their only thing is that, but oh look, people will start looking at Nota because the campaigns will start looking at Nota, because then you will probably want to win their voter bank and all that sorts. Notice their own analysis at PM. They already bite the bullet that people don't come for voting either way. There is only like 50 to 60% of the people who vote, meaning that parties already have the analysis that 40% of the voting bank is not coming to vote, meaning we need to deal with what they are essentially having the problems. We can actually start targeting them, meaning that the policies and the ways in which you actually campaign can significantly change. Notice in this entire 1 minute that I spent, their entire benefits only come from this re-election policy, and i.e. that re-election is probably going to make more people come to vote, right? I'll spend another the remaining time just proving to you as to why you don't get any benefits out of this, and it's a major harm, and why this policy was pretty shit at the start itself. Noticing number one, who are people who are likely to vote Nota in the first place? It's not necessary that it's going to be only those people who are dissatisfied with only the two parties and hence they choose Vota. It's probably people who have individualistic problems and specific changes that they want in the first place that neither parties are inherently able to do. Right? I probably might have a small problem that, oh look, in Bangalore I'm pretty much stranded because they're not making proper roads here. None of them are actually dealing with this particular road. I'm more likely to vote Nota because no one's actually answering my problem, right? Notice that this single issue voter is going to differ on an individualistic level, right? I.e., each Nota person who's going to vote for Nota is probably going to have some sort of an issue, but in a more specific level, right? Because they probably don't want to, they probably didn't look at the campaign of each and every single candidate. They probably only cared about their own specific problems at that point. Notice what's the problem here. According to their own analysis, if you have to go ahead and actually look for these Nota people and actually their problems, you have to do it on an individualistic level. That's physically and practically not possible because each one have different issues. You cannot go on an individualistic level. Now moving on to re-elections, right? I think there were two things that they say. One, that you're more likely to go ahead and change your party leaders because that's probably going to change the way that, because people aren't satisfied with their party leaders and all of that sorts. Why are party leaders not likely to change, right? I think it's just very simple, right? One, like what I said, there is less time to pick a leader to start for the entire party. Even if there is a Nota and it essentially leads to a re-election, you're unsure as to unsure as to who to pick during that particular period of time between the end of the first elections and the starting of the second elections. But two, internal politics already exists. Nota has been existing since 2013, and even on media there has been so much of push and so much of memes inherently created about Rahul Gandhi, right? But notice that INC will never change their their leader and their way in which they actually focus on their leaders, right? Because there's so much of internal politics that exists within these political parties that is something that is beyond our own political thing. Even if they want to win for elections, which INC definitely want to do, they're still not going to change the leaders because of this internal politics either way. Just taking that example, I think op loses here. But I think the third idea then, right? I think it's just very simple. Even if I bite the bullet and say that they want to change, the issue is the individualistic voter of Nota. You're unsure as to who you want to necessarily keep as a leader in the first place. That means you probably have to go ahead and actually get information from each specific leader. Notice that these people themselves don't know who are the other leaders that they can essentially fight for, right? You probably have so many other options that are existing within Congress, and you probably have a very distributed amount of people as to who they can choose, right? Notice that it's very less likely to change a leader, but even if that's not true, it's very less likely to choose who is going to be the next leader, meaning at this less period of time, they're probably not going to do that. What is this more likely going to look like, right? You're probably going to change you probably want to win the next campaign, and that's probably the way that you're going to think about it. There are certain problems within this. I have three levels of this. One, how it affects policies. One, how it affects people, and three, how it affects the general way of development. One, I'll start with how it affects people. Notice that people inherently can't go up and down for elections every single time. It's very difficult for people to participate within elections. Two reasons why. One, people in India actually live in a large amount of pockets in general. They live in a large amount of distant villages. Notice that they have to come to voting booths. They probably have to take a bus or a train to come to these big cities in order to give their votes in the first place. Notice that their side, if you inherently want to have a re-election every single time NOTA essentially happens and then NOTA essentially wins for majority, they probably can't afford to do so. But two, many businesses and people's businesses are probably come to a standstill because of this, right? You probably at the standstill because probably at the standstill because the country is in this voting place, they're in campaigns and all of the sorts. I'm not taking a POI, right? Noting at that point that the people's business is going to standstill, their day-to-day lives are affected because of elections in the first place. Now, two, the amount of effect that it has on the the country and the policies itself, right? Notice that if you have a governmental change and there is a re-election that has to happen in let's say 2 to 3 times, or even if you talk about it 2 to 3 times as a whole, notice that the government comes into a standstill, meaning that development projects and policies come to a standstill, meaning that the development of the nation and the way the nation has to proceed is probably going to be in a standstill. But before I actually go ahead to the third point, I want to actually caveat something. Re-elections, even if I take them on their best case of being extremely rare, noticing that if it is rare, notice that governments don't know how, parties don't know how to deal with it. Their budgeting is more likely to be fucked because it's the first time that is happening. They don't know how to handle stuff. And notice that election policies are things that take billions of dollars because you probably have to reach to every single state that exists within the nation, and you still aren't able to going to do that, right? Meaning that the amount of money that you can spend on policies aren't essentially happening. But the third thing, the comparative is very simple, and this is the positive that we have. Notice on their side, you're probably going to call out on the basis of campaigns, i.e., the small changes that you have campaigns and say why you should vote for us. But on our side, the weighing is very simple. You call out on policies, the 4 years that essentially BJP has, and the policies that they have, 5 years that BJP has, and the amount of policies that they created, and you're able to call that out, right? Abhay will do the weighing. So propose.
We thank the last speaker for the very fine speech, calling on government whip here. Government whip whenever you're ready.
I'll be starting my speech in about 15 seconds. I'll get my points in order. Yeah. I will be starting my. First of all, POIs. Just a minute.
I'm so sorry, there's a slight disturbance here. Just give me a minute. Yes. So I'll be taking POIs post the 5th minute. Please put it in the chat box. Having said that, I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, first of all, let me begin by establishing what democratic principles are, right? When we talk about a democracy, reflection of people's voices, who they want to be governed by, how they want to be governed, is everything that democracy stands for and what it espouses. When people are given the right to vote their leaders, you're essentially upholding the very essence or the very principle of democracy. When we also give people a right not to vote for any of the people or any of the candidates who have stood for elections, it is also an exercise of their right not to choose anybody who has already stood for elections, which also forms a major role or part of democratic principles. Having said that, panel, let's look at the best case that side op has. That is, let's say re-elections do take place, right? So what is the harm that they come and give us? They say about how, there's a lot of wastage that takes place, a lot of time and resources that go into re-elections. Panel, first of all, side op never comes and tells us that, how often do these re-elections do even happen, right? So they come and speak like as though re-elections happen every now and then, and you keep investing a lot of money into it, right? Number one. Number two, even if, let's say, re-elections do happen, right? Here, what the idea that we're trying to establish is that we're trying to give that even if the money is being lost, what is this money that that the candidates are using for the purpose of their campaigns, right? This is the money of taxpayers. This is public money that they're essentially using for the purpose of conducting campaigns again. Panel, even though there is this slight cost or this expense that they will have to incur, this is an expense that they will have to incur in exchange for the right that we are exercising and as a democratic nation. Panel, so if there is somebody, if a party realizes that they have been voted out, or let's say none of the party's majority of the people have not voted for them, that will make them actually rethink that I still have to cater to the needs of the people and things like that. Panel, also we need to understand here the idea is to give people an option to send a strong message on two ends. Number one, on the part of the parties themselves, and number two, on the part of the people. Let me explain how. Panel, firstly, when we look at on the part of the parties, here, even though the number of people who are voting for NOTA may be a small amount, let's say 20% of the people are voting as NOTA. But if we go by the current recommendation that even if there is NOTA which turns out to be majority in any of the elections, that will lead to a possibility of none of the parties coming into power and a re-election happening. That by itself instills a sort of fear and also incentivizes the party, because there is a possibility of this happening, right? So all the parties, being rational, and the political candidates know for a fact that they cannot afford re-elections, or they cannot afford to not be put in power, which automatically means that they would rather invest that money in trying to identify who are these people who are choosing this NOTA, or people who are not voting at all, and try to cater to these minority groups, or try to cater to these younger people, and frame their campaigns or their policies in a way that would incentivize them. For the panel side, op comes and tells us, how these political systems are filled with leaders who are treated as gods, and it's impossible to change their ideologies and things like that. Panel, we are not coming and telling that political parties have to change their very ideologies and things like that. All that we're trying to say is that when we look at local candidates that are present in different places standing for elections, when people do actually come and see the candidate that has stood, they no longer have to vote merely on the fact that, oh, this candidate is from BJP. Let's say Modi is the face value of BJP. So since I know Modi is good, I'm just going to vote for him. No, in that way, there is no incentive for these political parties to go ahead and
taken these fresh candidates or young candidates who can actually make a difference, at least at the local levels, right? So even if they have at the face of it, why these parties can actually instill this in the minds of the people that yes, this is a young leader who can bring about changes this way and actually adapt to the current situations, that is still enough for them to go ahead and appoint these or get these candidates there, right? So further panel, what we have to understand is that they come and say there's no calling out that takes place, or let's say the opposition cannot come and call out the government in power in our case. Panel, even in our end of the paradigm, there is still calling out that will take place because of two reasons. Number one, there will still be competitiveness among different parties who will still fight for power, because of which calling out the parties when they don't party in power when they don't act as needed will still exist in our end of the paradigm. Number two, we still have platforms like media, etc., where there's naming and shaming that will still take place, panel, because of which parties who are in power, even in our end of the paradigm, will be subjected to calling out and will still be accountable. Further, why parties themselves don't want re-elections, because and that itself would automatically take care of this major problem of having re-elections, but at the same time get the benefit that we require them to do by required of them through this recommendation, simply because there is a possibility, or simply because they know there is a slight chance because of this recommendation that let's say there are people who decide that okay, there are two evils there and I don't want either of them. That means neither of them do come into power, which means they again have to spend immense amounts of resources in terms of time, efforts and money, and go through this entire process, which parties themselves don't want, and that itself would incentivize them to go ahead and come up with better policies as such, and that also will incentivize them to put better candidates, and that will bring about internal changes within the parties themselves. For the panel, they come in and talk about how the minorities will suffer because of these re-elections and things like that, because they have to go for their employment and things like that. Panel, they nowhere come and tell how in their end of the paradigm this still won't exist, right? So if I'm a minority, if I'm a migrant worker who has to work today, in their end of the paradigm, why is it that he will still go and choose to cast his vote, and why is that a problem only on our end? But on the contrary, it will still be better on our end of the paradigm, just because this minority or this migrant worker now knows for a fact that if let's say he belongs to Congress, and he knows that he doesn't want to vote for BJP, but he knows Congress is bad, he knows for a fact he doesn't have to vote for either, because there is a possibility of this choice of his being actually taken into account and can possibly make a change, and that by itself would increase the overall voter turnout, leading to better accountability, better policies, and therefore welfare of the country at large. With this, I feel we clearly take over this debate.
I thank the last speaker for the very fine speech calling on opposition grip. Here.
Great. I'm visible and audible, I assume.
Yes, you're.
Perfect. Cool. I'll take one POI, guys. So like strategically time it, I guess. But at 5:30, if I've not taken it, you can just like unmute and yell POI. Cool. Starting in 3, 2, 1. On our side, we obtain true democratic process without a myopic policy base focused on ineffective solutions for a tiny proportion of the population, constructed by parties solely to win elections in re-elections, for which they have not planned based on their own analysis. Our framing and its importance. First, if we prove to you that we get symmetric benefits without the specific harms of re-election, we win quite clearly. Second, I will prove on every single ground that we win this debate, making it the clearest one you've had so far. And I will take down the ridiculous principle, which they do not actually ground. Like, I have a bunch of general clarifications before I go into actually weighing this debate and looking at the questions posed. First one, problems with their speech, because I like to critique the speech. First off, PM says that 50% of the people do not vote. That shows our case about these statistics being widely known. This is something that parties still note, and on our side of the house, do they want to win in the next election, which means they'll try and unlock those voter bases. All of this means that NOTA is still a possibility on our side of the house. You just don't have to go and push that button, because on our side of the house, we don't want the costs of re-election. Secondly, DPM says says, but minorities and young still vote Nota. But somehow they also say in the very same speech that they forcibly have to choose between one of them. We're unsure why as to what people have to forcibly choose between one of the parties. There is absolutely no mechanization for these. Look through the notes. Why will people who currently don't vote still not vote on their side of the house? First off, they themselves say that there's very small state instances of Nota being a majority. Even if this is empirically true, right? People who want specific change, that's their most important thing, and those are the most important people who actually end up voting Nota. If I hate the noise pollution outside my place and neither party is able to solve it, that makes me a single issue voter, and I am the type of person who will vote Nota. Note throughout their speeches, they never explain what these Nota people actually want or how they get it. Our analysis is the only one that shows you that these parties simply cannot satisfy all of these Nota voters, which means that you either have recurring re-elections or like a very appeasing, like short-term policy that is implemented, which does not actually cater to most of the single issue voters, because every single issue voter has different set of instances, right? Secondly, and this is common across all their speeches, they say there will be change, there's no mechanization. We give you concrete reasons right from above as to why you get change on our side. Second, they never explain who this specific voter person is. That's what I just explained. Third and finally, they screw their own case, right? Because they say that there's very little amount of instances where Nota being a majority actually happens. Because if this is so rare, there's no need to change policies. If it's so rare that it only happens in one province in Bihar, I do not care as Modi about this particular province and Congress can go and win it. They have to get and have to take the burden that like a whole state which is major to the election actually ends up voting Nota, and only in those instances their like actual benefits accrue, right? They say it never happens so rarely, which means that the budget is probably screwed and Nota voters still probably end up being Nota. Two questions then. First, is this re-election good, like empirically? Second, on principle, we will win on both. In terms of the re-election argument, they make one argument. They say that parties can change their leader in prime minister's speech, which then becomes, oh, they'll change their policies in deputy prime minister. But based on DPM's own analysis about how like people don't vote for BJP because they don't like the BJP ideology, which means like Modi, etc., and Rahul Gandhi is not like an incompetent person who they can't vote for, means that they still probably have to change leaders in order to actually get any change on their side of the house. But they really can't, right? Why not? Because campaign leaders are seen as near gods. There is no response to this other than saying, oh, they're not. No, this is empirically true. There are posters plastered everywhere. This is the largest democracy in the world. All of this campaigning is the largest fundraising in the world. All of this happens at an incredibly high level of scale. They spend years campaigning for this individual and for those particular policies on which they stand, from the previous election right until the next one. You cannot go and change those policies just within the 2 months to win this election, which means that these parties don't actually affect true change, but just probably go for short-term empirical goals. Absolutely worst case scenario, we still think it's symmetric, because if they don't win majority on our side, they still probably need to form a coalition, and in that coalition, the minority voices come out. We think that that's a good thing inherently, right? What do we say and how do you wait? First off, myopic changes or benefits on our side, on their side happen. Why is this true? What does this true change look like then? Their short-termist policies are introduced. Why? Because there's less time to actually make an impact. Countries like India are very unique to every region. They can't actually stall these structural issues within 2 months. What happens? Policies are introduced which are incredibly myopic. This is really harmful because there's no long-term governance strategies that take precedence, because parties don't want re-election as per their own analysis, so they want to appease them in the short term. This is really harmful. Even in the worst case, we bite the bullet. We say that you're forced to go as a minority and vote. We still think that's important because they can vote for minority parties. They can vote for non-BJP or non-Congress parties, which are forced to form coalitions, because if these Nota people end up forming a majority anyway, these coalitions which are formed will actually take the sort of changes, but in a much better way that comes out from Nota. That is symmetric in the worst case and beneficial in the best case. The harms on their side of the house. First, in terms of the cost of re-campaign, they say it happens rarely. We do not think so in order to get their benefits. Even if it happens rarely, it's really very expensive for these parties. They don't plan or budget this, which means these are probably done in a really bad way. Second, voter fatigue. There's no analysis for this, right? On their side as response. Arvind explains this and this goes completely unrefuted. Third, in terms of minority issues, we proved you why minorities are likely to suffer the most as a result of this. They have literally no analysis other than saying, oh, minorities want to vote. They can still vote on our side of the house and still get the form of change that they want. I'll take a POI.
Parties spend a lot amount in campaigning, rallying, etc. They have an active incentive from the beginning to prepare a propaganda that feeds to everyone rather than just affecting a change in 2 to 3 months. Why this is something?
It's very simple. If it rarely happens, they have no incentive to do that. It's like this, right? I could prepare every single day for a meteor striking my house. It never would happen, so I won't do it. That's the reason why parties probably don't do it. They want to get the most value out of their votes, and that's probably gained by appealing to the majority. Your analysis is non-existent. Question 2 then on the principle. Their argument is is simple, that there's a principal right to assert not being happy with parties. I completely agree with this. They can still not show up, and that's counted too. They have to prove there's a structural difference between not voting and that being seen by everyone as per the PM's own concession versus pressing NOTA and that being seen by all. They don't, right? They just say that it's good to come and press a button. But why? I can't just claim that it's inherently good to do something. They actually had to mechanize that for you. Look through your notes panel. There is no mechanization for this, right? There is no true power for it other than re-election, which is necessarily harmful for these particular people who vote NOTA. Arvind's analysis explains this for you, which means it's more harmful for these people. Anyway, in that manner, we choose the right of these people to abstain from elections, and that being recognized at the global level. How do you weigh this then, right? Because you get same amount of optics and the same degree of call out, which means that the principle is symmetric, and the outcomes-based preferences that they get as a result for this principle to stand are something that we disprove by showing to you that these necessarily harmful outcomes actually accrue much more easily for these parties, right? They can't just say that, oh, parties will be smart and plan accordingly, and also in the same speech claim that it's very rare. They can't just say that it will be very rare and then say that they effectuate real change. They can't just say that, like, we know statistics about the number of people who are not voting, and at the same speech say that you have to go press a vote just to express yourself. You can still express yourself on their own analysis. Extremely glad to oppose and win this debate clearly.
I thank the last speaker for the very fine speech, calling on opposition to reply. You're here.
Hi, am I audible?
Loud and clear.
Yeah, give me 30 seconds to gather my notes. Hi, am I audible? Cool. Awesome. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1, go. As a reasonable, as an average intelligent voter, how you necessarily need to see this debate, right? Notice that there are a large amount of clashes, but I think it just comes down to these two. I think like the whole idea of like principle of democracy, how the policies are better, how it affects people. One, on the principle of democracy. Throughout all of the 3 speeches that we have inherently given, we prove to you, and I don't think they ever refute this, you can look through your notes, that it inherently remains symmetric on both sides. Because the idea of principle of democracy that side like government tries to set up is that you want to know what like, the people feel about their own candidates and how the people are inherently standing, right? Notice on one end, they say that you can probably vote and like, what do you say, NOTA. So if it is actually coming out to be majority, meaning that the other 2 candidates that exist are pretty bad. Notice on the other end, if you pretty much show that no one actually shows up within like what do you say elections, and you actually see that there's a 50% of people who don't show up to elections, this also shows that the 2 candidates are standing is pretty bad. I am unsure then why this whole idea of like which one is more important then comes to or like a play. But here's then it comes to play, meaning this whole principle of democracy, even if they say it's important, we say that it's also important, but they never prove as to why it doesn't stand on our side. Meaning if they don't do that, the logic of principles, they don't win that clash. It ends up being symmetric. But 2, on the idea of like how parties inherently like what ideas like how like people inherently like deal with this the NOTA vote as a whole, right? Go back to Avyay's analysis and go back to my own analysis as a whole, right? Notice at a fact when this number is extremely low, the leaders inherently already win that place anyway. If NOTA is like 5 to 10%, doesn't matter, BJP wins there regardless, right? Notice if that's the case, notice that like what do you say, like constituencies like parties like BJP and Congress are less likely to look at these states in the first place, just simply because of the fact that it doesn't make a difference. But even if they were to do so, right, in these areas, notice that we proved to you that how it's almost impossible to go at an individualistic level. Both of this analysis inherently shows to you that the positives that they inherently try to prove is significantly skewed and not possible as a whole, right? So notice that this point as very negligible. The only time in which they actually get or accrue some positive is when NOTA comes out to be a majority and when the constituency is declared as a no winner. We proved to you in three simple metrics as to why we win that, right? One on the like the area of like the parties themselves, why they're less likely to change majority of their policies and why they're less likely to change the leaders itself, right? The leaders, we say that there's less time, we say that there's internal politics, they say that they're god figures that are plastered throughout the nation. Notice that there is literally no response to this, meaning this actually stands, right? Meaning parties leaders cannot be changed, but their core policies cannot be changed as well, meaning the core policy, and this is something that is common between both states. I am unsure then what people inherently look at these things. The only things that change is probably like campaigns and the small myopic policies that they create here. Here's then the comparative that we provide to you in this debate. On their side, you probably have like politics that are done on calling out campaigns and like the promises that they make, because you probably don't want to go into a re-election. And even if you do, this is the only thing that you can actually deal with them. Meaning that the policies that you're going to have is extremely myopic on their side, meaning that you're not going to look for a long-term benefit or how it essentially plays out in the long side, right? But notice on our side, at a point when you actually have to, like, you have that 5-year buffer in which like the policies are actually implemented. Notice that Congress can actually call out BJP. You can have YouTubers like Gopalkrishna also call out BJP for the actual policies that they did between 2019 and 2023 and show that this is extremely bad, right? Notice that in the 5 years from 2019 to 2023, they did fuck all, and 2024 elections, this can inherently go ahead and actually reflect within the results. They don't get that on their side, just simply because of the fact that they can't either reach out to all the NOTA people, but even so, the policies are extremely myopic because of the reasons that I've told you. Meaning, in that positive, we win this debate. But I think then on the people's perspective, why you're less likely not to get voters on their side? Just simply because of the reason that elections itself is a pain for people, right? They have to travel a lot, businesses are shut. All of this analysis they never really deal with. Notice that fact, they probably don't even accrue that benefit on their side. With all of these reasons, there's literally no benefit that stands on their side. There's a lot of negatives to this, a lot of like a relative positive on our side. We clearly win this debate.
I thank the last speaker for the very fine speech, calling on government reply. Here.
Okay, hoping I'm audible. Just give me 3 seconds. No, actually, give me 15 seconds, please. Starting in 3, 2, 1. Panel, we don't think that team opposition understood our case simply because of the fact that they never go ahead and refute the principle in itself. All their responses, but you know what? People not showing up to election booth is a message in itself. That is a message, but what we told you in terms of like narrative, the way it is seen, it means me not going to election booth simply makes me alienated from the whole system of the democracy itself. It means I do not actively participate in the election process itself, and that is not the appropriate message. That is not the message through which we can get any amount of change, right? The true message only gets when you be the part of system and tell the system how the system sucks. That's why you are going ahead and pressing that vote. That's why it's very extremely important for you to go ahead and press that vote. Sitting at home does not give the second message. But mostly they don't realize that voter count being less in the status quo is something that political parties are not fearful of. They are very happy that less people are turning out and they are literally voting them. But the moment they realize that people have another option and they can go ahead and exercise, there is some amount of fear, there is some amount of incentive that even if 10% people cast vote of NOTA, it means there is higher burden to go ahead and win those elections. And that's what we explained you in our second speech, right? It's not about like affecting the changes that op is trying to tell you in this debate. No one can prove in this debate that leaders will change. This is something that nobody is taking the burden of, right? What we tell you is the way elections are conducted, the way political parties see their change. It means Modi is still going to rule BJP, but at the same time, the people who are going to stand for different seats, different localities can be changed, because now you have a fear which you did not have when 50% of people choose to sit at their home and not vote. That's the fear that we were talking about. This debate cannot be about, like, all these what if people vote, what if developmental plans stop, what if re-election. But I will do a best case, worst case analysis. My worst case, or like, let's say their best case is re-elections keep on happening. That's what they have been talking about. Their only harm that they give you, what, funding is going to get affected. First of all, they never explain to you why this is a concurrent event that will happen in itself. But secondly, they, although even if like there is some amount of loss of money, we tell you it's taxpayers money, and in terms of like money that gives you a right to decide what you want, to give a clear message in terms of who you want to select or whether you want to select or not. We think that this right in itself is something that's extremely important, and we think that it's okay for you to go ahead and spend money given that it's a right of yours too. We do not understand why this sort of funding is going to be the tipping point in this debate. It's extremely important where it decides who should take this debate. We think as long as we can uphold democracy, we are okay with like going ahead and having this amount of money lost in our worst case, right? But second thing, they tell you developmental plans etc will stop. I can understand. Political parties are not going to prepare for camping in 2-3 months. They have two reasons why they don't want the re-elections. They will have a fear because now they have to appeal to 60-70% voter who is coming to vote, right? And if 20% of them are also pulling nota, it means you have much more fear. And this fear is directly related because when they go for campaigning, when they go for like rally, they spend money. Even in printing posters, they spend money. There's a money that goes into campaigning. They won't want. But secondly, now candidates have a personal liability, as Yash has explained to you. When I know that if I do not win from my constituency, the re-election will happen and probably Yash will take my place as a political leader in itself or a political party candidate in itself. I will also take a personal liability to go ahead and make sure I work good or give them the right policy. The only response they have is, but you know what, people want different things. When we say that policy changes, everyone knows people want different things. But at the same time, they do not want to vote for things like whether if there is a lack of supply of electricity in a region, it affects a locality. If there are bad education policies, it affects a locality. These are basic things that even rational people, you as an average voter, wants. It means you will still compare policy, you will still see policy in a broader spectrum, not like how Abhay has told you that no, you are only going to vote on your specific problem. At that particular point, we think that we clearly take this debate. Here.
I thank the last speaker for the very fine speech. With this, we come to an end of this debate. I request the speakers to cross floor virtually and shake hands. I request my panelists to please join me in the judge deliberation room on Discord. Thank you so much.